A heated debate erupted on Twitter recently. The reason? Someone found on the social network the account of one of the people who was involved in what is known as the worst crime in Japan. Everyone was outraged that the individual was free and could access a social network. What sparked the fury of internet users was the way the man referred to the murder he helped commit 34 years ago. A savage, emblematic murder that inspired documentaries, fiction, and even a manga. In turn, this caused the background of the murder to come to light again, and the outrage only continued to escalate. Along with evidence of a gruesome death, the justice system handled this case in a highly questionable and poor manner. Let's not get ahead of ourselves to grasp the seriousness of what happened. And before knowing what happened when the profile of this killer was discovered on the En Los Negros platform, it's necessary to start from the beginning, and for that, we have to go back to 1988. Today, we're going to learn about the updates on the Junko Furuta case. Before we continue, were you already familiar with this case? If so, how did you learn about it? After watching the video and learning all aspects, please share your conclusions with me. The case is intense and makes people feel helpless, so I'll ask you in the comments. Let's try not to be violent and have an exchange of opinions without resorting to insults. And besides that, I want to tell you that this is an ongoing case, so if you want us to make a second part, I'm going to ask you. Likes. If this video gets over 6,000 likes, I'll know you're interested in the topic and we'll prepare a second part about the updates that are coming out right now. And now, yes, let's begin. It was a little after 8:30 p.m. on November 25, 1988. Junko Furuta, 17 years old, was riding her bicycle home from work. Junko was a hard-working, intelligent and upright girl. She was disciplined and focused on building a future that lived up to the expectations, which were not few. She was born in Misato, still lived with her parents, and was the middle child of 3 siblings. With her high school studies about to be finished, she had started looking for a job that would allow her to save up for a graduation trip she dreamed of. She had managed to get a job at a plastic molding factory. She was coming back from there that afternoon, carefree, probably lost in her fantasies of becoming a famous singer. Of course, she didn't know that those meters pedaling would be her last minutes of freedom. We could say that fate knocked on her door, but the truth is that fate knocked on her bicycle. And in this story, fate has a first and last name. Nobuharu Minato, 16 years old. He suddenly appeared on his motorcycle, crashed into Junko and knocked her down by surprise. Furuta managed to look up, expecting the worst, assuming that this ambush was the prelude to a robbery. Nobuharu looked at her with malice and started to approach her. However, Furuta didn't have time to start screaming. When she was about to do it, someone appeared behind her attacker. Someone who bravely confronted the attacker and, after some threats, forced him to back off. A kind of angel. He wasn't a stranger to the girl. Her spontaneous savior was none other than Miyano Hiroshi. Junko had mixed feelings about Miyano. He had gone to the same school as her. On one occasion, in front of the whole class, he had declared his love for her, but she had rejected him. The young man had a history of problematic behavior. Nothing too serious, or so Junko thought. The problem was that there were many things the girl didn't know. Nobuharu didn't know, for example, that in recent months Miyano had stopped being a petty criminal and had become part of the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. He had stopped having problems with petty theft and had started getting involved in serious assaults. Junko also didn't know Nobuharu was a close friend of Miyano or that they had planned the supposed casual encounter. She didn't know that the one who boasted about saving her life was actually the predator who was cornering her, little by little. After asking her if she was okay, Miyano offered to walk Junko home to make sure nothing bad happened to her again. Junko agreed after hesitating. They walked a few blocks together. Furuta gradually relaxed and told her companion that she was anxious to watch the final episode of the television show Tombo that day. When they were getting close to their destination, something changed in Miyano's face. His trustworthy smile suddenly faded, and Junko realized too late that she had nowhere to escape. Miyano pulled out a knife and threatened her. If she didn't follow him, he would kill her right there. According to consistent testimonies, a little over a month later, a disfigured Junko would beg them to please end her life. At that moment, however, she faced the threat, and Miyano dragged her to an abandoned warehouse, making sure no one saw him. Thus began a hell that would last 44 years. We are not going to go into the details of the torture that Junko Furuta suffered. The case is so brutal that it still draws attention from both curious people and professionals. Knowing the level of cruelty with which Junko was treated during her days of captivity always leaves a bitter taste, and the certainty that human evil can surpass any limit set by imagination. It's enough to mention certain important facts to give us an idea of the extent of the abuse Junko suffered. Miyano brought the girl to his associate Nobuharu's house. Once there, he called two other friends who were also minors, Yo Ogura and Yasuji Watanabe. The four of them made Junko's hours a real nightmare. Not only did the abuse continue, but they even hung the young woman up to use her as a punching bag, and that was just the beginning. They gagged, locked her up, beat her with dumbbells, burned her with cigarettes and candles, and inserted objects like light bulbs, scissors, and iron bars. They even put fireworks in her private parts, causing her severe burns and rupturing her internal organs. Not satisfied with that, Miyano and his friends invited other members of the Yakuza to take part in the criminal feast. After being locked up for 48 hours, already bruised and weak, Junko was forced to call her parents and tell them she was staying at a friend's house. Nobuharu's parents were in the same house where those atrocities were taking place in the last room, but they didn't say anything about it. Junko had been introduced as their son's girlfriend, and they would later state that they were afraid. They knew something very bad was happening, and they assumed that if they reported it, their own lives could be in danger. The kidnappers also forced her to smoke several cigarettes at once and inhale paint thinner. In one incident, Emiliano repeatedly burned Furuta's limbs. By the end of December, the young woman was severely malnourished after being fed with waste and her own urine. She was abused by over 100 men. Due to her severe wounds and infected burns, she couldn't go to the bathroom and was confined to a small part of the room. Her body was also severely crippled, giving off a putrid smell that made the four boys lose interest in her. They also kidnapped and abused another 19-year-old woman who, like Furuta, was returning home from work. Much was written and said about everything the girl experienced in those four walls. The details only reveal the obvious. That was something horrific, which had the complicity of many people in a part of the country where attacks on women were normalized because of how often they happened. On January 4, 1989, just 14 days before she would have turned 18, Junko Furuta died. One version of the story says that the girl's captors invited her to play a board game as a form of mockery, assuming that after more than 40 days of abuse, the teenager would no longer be able to use that remarkable intelligence that all her teachers used to praise. However, it seems that Junko, despite her condition, won the game, which unleashed Mayano's final rage, and he set her on fire again. After several hours of suffering, Junko collapsed during convulsions. Fearing punishment for the murder, the group wrapped Junko Furuta's body in blankets and placed her in a suitcase. Then they threw her body into a 210-liter drum and filled it with wet concrete. Miyano even placed a tape with the last episode of Tombo next to Junko Furuta's body. In front of the others' disbelief, he looked pale and they assumed he was scared that the girl's spirit would come back to haunt and torment him. This fear was probably what made him end up confessing to the crime in a confused episode. On January 23, 1989, Mayano and Joe Ogura were arrested for the attack they had committed on December 19 when they were already tired of abusing Furuta. The officers were on their trail and interrogated them separately. The police forces were convinced that the young men were behind the disappearance of a woman and her son. During the interrogation, one of the officers led Miyano to believe that the police were aware of a murder he had committed. Thinking that Joe Ogura had confessed to Furuta's crime, Miyano told law enforcement where to find the girl's body. The police were stunned when, upon arriving at the location, they found what they found. Around then, the media started discussing the worst case of juvenile delinquency in post-war Japan. Yukan Bunjun magazine revealed the names of the 4 torturers, stating that given the seriousness of the crime, they did not deserve to have their right to anonymity respected. The trial did not take long to begin and was closely followed by thousands of citizens who were left stunned. The 4 young men pleaded guilty to causing bodily harm that resulted in death. Murder was not mentioned and sexual abuse was ignored. The attackers were also tried as minors, which resulted in ridiculously light sentences considering the brutality of what happened. In July 1990, a trial court sentenced Hiroji Miyano, the alleged leader of the crime, to 20 years in prison. According to reports, Miyano's mother sent Furuta's parents 50 million yen after selling her family's house. Miyano was denied parole. In January 2013, he was arrested again for fraud. Due to insufficient evidence, he was released without charges later that month. He stayed involved with the Yakuza and his whereabouts are unknown. Yasuji Watanabe received a sentence of 5 to 7 years for his involvement in the crime. Joe Ogura spent 8 years in juvenile prison before his release in August 1999. After his release, he reportedly boasted about it. In July 2004, he was arrested for assaulting someone they thought could be his girlfriend's lover. Ogura's mother destroyed Furuta's grave, claiming that she had ruined her son's life. Nobuharu Minato was sentenced to 5 to 9 years. In 2018, he was arrested again for attempted murder. In 2020, not only was he free again, but under a changed identity, he maintained a very active presence on social media, mainly on Twitter. When the community found out who he was, the news quickly spread. There were 2 distinct groups of people. Those who quickly visited the alleged killer's profile to harass and confront him about his past, and another group that tried to approach the matter in a less impulsive way. In light of this, there were basic issues to analyze. Was everyone sure that this profile belonged to one of the people who had killed Furuta? And if that were the case, was it really wise to start a social lynching? If the justice system had sentenced him too lightly, according to many, shouldn't the justice system be the one to receive the complaint? Minato was threatened. Others reminded him of his crime and suggested that he should end his life if he had any dignity left. Minato used and still uses his profile to share information related to conspiracy theories. As can be seen in his posts, he is a firm believer that the United States government is carrying out interventions in people's brain probes to create a kind of conditioning. Minato even mentions not being able to sleep well, a symptom he claims to share with millions of people. His explanation for the matter is the presence of electromagnetic pulses that would be altering the cognitive abilities of human beings. Although at one point there was doubt as to whether this user was really one of Junko's killers, the doubt was settled when Minato decided to address the issue, causing the debate to become more and more heated. Based on his words, Minato believes he was judged unfairly as the United Nations wants to stop and dismiss him due to his fight against tech crime. Minato is seen as dangerous for revealing the actions of major world powers. In a post that was reposted and condemned by thousands of people in the last few hours, Minato calls Junko's murder a shameful event from his childhood. The tweet was replied to by many users who consider it disrespectful, the way the man talks about what he did, and the perspective he still has on the matter. There are currently groups claiming to be uncovering everything about the profile so they can soon publish the real address of the killer. And what will happen if they succeed? Vigilante justice, maybe? Many professionals and specialists are analyzing the issue with some detachment. What would happen if someone decides to do what they think is right and follows through on their promise to kill Minato? Can we tolerate someone doing that? Should we really endorse it? Furuta's parents were deeply distraught then by the sentences that their daughter's killers received, that they began a series of civil lawsuits, the main one against the parents of Nobuharu Minato, in whose home the crimes were committed. The place near where Junko's body was discovered has been developed since then, and now it is Wakasu Park, where flowers are occasionally left to remember the girl. After vandalism at her grave, Furuta's body was relocated to North Paradise Cemetery in Houston, Texas. The appearance of the alleged Minato's profile made it clear that society as a whole is still dissatisfied with the way things were resolved. In cases with this level of sadism, how is justice served? Many talk about the inevitable death penalty. Others prefer to argue that the death penalty was abolished in many places because it harmed certain humanitarian issues. So what happens when sentences don't reflect what society as a whole considers to be the most just? It's no longer about what Minato can or can't say. Even if he apologized, the reality is that most people only see him as the person who crashed into Junko by knocking her off her bicycle. To start like that with a series of indescribable abuses. What happens when we think that the person being punished doesn't deserve a chance at redemption? What's the next step? What would be the most logical thing? What should we expect to happen? What do you all think about it? The topic is very sensitive, and that's why I'm interested in us really making an effort to share well-argued opinions. I'll read your comments.